Cool. Hey guys. So yeah, today we've got a pretty cool guest lecture. It's from Foraker Labs, which is, you guys are on 20th Street Mall, right? Or like over
that area, yeah.
the area. Rails dev shop based in Boulder. Do some really awesome stuff. Really cool guys. So they're going to tell you a little bit about some of the stuff in the kind of model view controller and active record world that you've been working in, and tell you about the internships that they've got going on. So, awesome.
Okay. Hey, I'm Ben. This is Kyle. This is Matt. We're developers at Foraker. My agenda today is just to quickly hit on some Foraker cultural practices and some of our values. Just to kind of tell you a little bit about us. Then I'll go into detail and talk about our internship program specifically, and then we'll look at some code. That sounds good.
Cool.
Okay. That's my agenda that I just explained. Oh, yeah, and then at the end we'll answer some questions if you've got them. Next slide, please. Okay, yeah, so Foraker, what is a Foraker? Foraker is a mountain in Alaska, and it's kind of our mascot, a symbol of the virtues of quality software development. So mountains are cool, enduring, so we like to describe to that. Labs. We got this really synced up. Slightly too far away. The labs portion of our name comes from the fact that we had a lab inside of our company. It's where we test software on real users. We subject them to our decisions and assumptions and see what comes out the other side. So that's kind of the etymology of Foraker. Okay. But our bread and butter is software consulting and development services. So we work closely with clients to develop applications for them to solve some particular need that they had. And so this is roughly the product cycle at Foraker. It starts off with sales. So we're actually really picky in this phase. It's important for us to find people that think similarly to us. And so we vet our clients pretty heavily, and we find out if they're going to be a compatible fit. And so if they have any unreasonable demands, like they haven't really thought through their concept far enough, or they want us to work 80 hours a week, it's probably not going to be a great fit, but it can succeed. So there's the heavy attrition rate at the sales cycle phase. Next phase is the workshop phase. So that's where we all gather in a room, the team of developers and designers who are actually going to work on the product and the clients, and we hash out the details of what we're trying to build. Next phase is design, so kind of look and feel of the application, starting to establish some of the core UI components, and then we're into development, which is my favorite phase. So we work for several weeks in iterations in pursuit of a product milestone, and once we hit that milestone, we make sure everything's deployed to production, and we begin our user testing and evaluation phase. So we try to understand if our assumptions that we made, the underlying assumptions that we made crafting the application were correct, and we make any strategic changes in the product if it's necessary. So on a day-to-day basis, our contribution is, as developers, is the creation of the software. So these are some of the core principles and practices of our software development team. So we value working together. So this includes things like pair programming. When challenges arise, you grab teammates, hit a whiteboard, and try to hash things out face to face. This working together also extends to our policy with client communication. We expect developers to be able to craft emails to clients, jump on the phone with clients, and represent us well. We also value pragmatism over dogma, so we don't like to adopt practices just because they seem like agile practices, or we don't do things like mandate that everyone pairs 100% of the time. So we try to keep a reasoned approach about whatever practices we do adopt. We prefer generalists over specialists, so that means that we expect developers to be full stack developers. They can be effective in the back end, on the front end, any part of the system. It's not to say that people don't have certain specialties, but everyone is at least comfortable working on everyone else's code. Code review is a huge one for us, actually. So we use GitHub pull requests to review code. Have you guys used that before?
Yeah, they submit all their work with a pull request.
Oh, perfect. That's great. So, yeah, we really get into the PRs and have a lot of communication that transpires there. So I think that's what the feedback I've heard from our junior developers and historical interns has been that the code review process is probably the single most valuable component of what we do. You can learn a lot from it, and you get to learn about all of our little emoji memes that we use frequently for requests. Another tenet is user tools. So we're not going to try to make any demands about what text editors or just other various development tools developers use. We like developers to be comfortable using whatever they're most familiar with. This is kind of a cliche, I think, in software, but strong opinions weakly held. We like to think that we are pretty fervent with our beliefs, but we're willing to update them given new information. And sustainable pacing is another big one for us. So that's kind of a must, especially at a consulting company where we're constantly in that crunch phase, working on products for other clients. So if we're not sustainable, if we don't optimize for our happiness before we optimize for our productivity, we're gonna burn out. So it's pretty bad. Awesome. Internships. So our internship program is 10 to 12 weeks. We're flexible about start dates. The different schools have different start and end times. We pay $20 an hour, and let's see, I have some specific notes here. You have 4 of them more? I think I talked a little bit more. There we go. Okay, yeah, so as an intern, your time will be roughly divided between these 3 categories. So client work, which is pretty much what it sounds like, working on actual client problems, billing, pairing with experienced developers, jumping into meetings, basically just walking in the shoes of a normal Foraker developer. Another category would be education and personal growth. So this is kind of alone time, working with resources to improve your skills with Rails, databases, JavaScript, any of that. So we'll help you locate those resources and expect you to use them. And the last one is collaboration. This is a new one that we're introducing this year. So we're going to have a capstone project for this year's set of interns, and we expect the interns to work together to produce something that is of value to Foraker, the community, but just work on a product over the course of the summer and produce something that's cool. Let's do one more. Is that it? Okay. So I guess I also just want to talk about briefly what we look for in interns. We look for the usual stuff, so enrolled in school, good grades, proven track record of success, all that stuff. But what we're really looking for is people who are curious and really motivated to learn and hungry to get better. So that's kind of our the main thing that we're after when we talk to people in interviews. Let's see. Yeah, so if you're self-directed, if you're capable of teaching yourself, those are definitely things to point out in an interview. We've got an email address here set up, so I don't think we've published our job description yet, but if you email us here and send us a resume and include in the body of the email, like why you make a fit at Foraker, how you plan to stand out, those sorts of things, just a little introduction to yourself, that would be the way to go about doing that. Okay, so without further ado, I think I'd like to look at some code and try to, yeah, maybe you can sit there, right? Is this going to mess up your taping?
It's fine.
Okay. All right, so my understanding is that you guys are currently working through Rails and models and a bit of active record. Is that true? Okay, so partially through the Hardwell tutorial.
Chapter 5, 6 area, yeah.
Okay. All right, so if we looked at code like this.
Let me turn the other light on.
Did everyone see that? Okay. I'm going to repeat that process a few times. Okay, so is this somewhat familiar, totally unfamiliar? Okay, all right. Great, so what we're going to talk about today is the robustness principle. So at Foraker, we do a lot of user testing. We have real users use our software, and as a result of observing them, the natural consequence of observing your users is that you begin to actually care about their experience. And it's funny how frequently that's overlooked. So on the behalf of our users, we've adopted a number of maxims to guide our daily development efforts in the best service of our users. So one of those is the robustness principle, which is a software engineering principle which states that you should be conservative in what you do, but be liberal in what you accept. And we're going to kind of key in on the second half of that, being liberal in what you accept. So what we accept from users in this case is a credit card number. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience on a website, but if you've ever typed in your credit card number and used hyphens, every once in a while the website will say, or the application will get mad at you because some lazy developer didn't strip them out, didn't get rid of them. So I know what I meant. Probably the application could figure out what I mean, but there's a developer in my way. So we're going to look at that today, and really briefly, let's review just some basic Ruby stuff here to make sure that we're all on the same page.
You could probably just change the display settings to do a different resolution.
Oh, probably. That seems like a smart thing to do. Let's go super low.
Oh, that worked.
Okay, so can you read that?
Now all the others will be fine.
Okay, cool. I'll do the inverse of that. Okay, so scale this back over to. So imagine you started out this course. Actually, I'm just curious, how many people had exposure to Ruby before admission? Okay, cool. So probably started out the course with a little bit of an introduction to Ruby. So if we wrote something like this, this is defining a class for a user, and we could potentially define a subclass for, say, a student. With me so far? Someone shout at me if I'm confusing. Okay, so if our user has a name method and our student has a name method, when we new up a user, let's just give them a name. Actually, let's just hard code it for now. Name of a user. This will be the name of a student. So if I call user.new and create a new user, instantiate a new user, and call the name method, I would expect to get the results of that method back, the name of the user. So if I print that out, that is indeed what I get. Similarly, if I instantiate a student, I'll get a message from the student. So in this, the fact that we are inheriting from user gives us the ability to invoke methods on the superclass. So student is the subclass, user is the superclass, right? So if I call super in this case, I can basically instruct a student to return me the method that was defined in the parent class. So in this case, we would expect to see the name of the user. And that is indeed what we get both times. Okay, so I'm just kind of concept checking for familiarity with super. Are we okay so far? Good? Okay. So in active record, in our models, we have the capacity to call super as well. And in this case, super will invoke what active record would have done by default. So if we define a method called number equals, which accepts the credit card number, we can override the default behavior of active record and call super, meaning set the number. But before we pass the number up to super, we have the opportunity to mess with it. So in this case, let's just call super and see if we can reproduce the default behavior. So I've got an application running here. So if I enter 45 as a credit card number, pretty weak definition of a valid credit card number, but 45 works. If I try to insert dashes in my credit card number, I'm going to be in trouble. So it'll tell me it's invalid, and that's unhelpful. So let's start out by just grabbing the number, inserting it as a string in case someone is unfortunate enough to pass us a nil, and then we're going to use a regular expression to get rid of anything that's not a number. So we'll get back to that pattern in a minute. So this is going to be something, this is going to be some regular expression that selects only numbers, and we're going to replace, or excuse me, selects everything that's not a number, and then we're going to replace everything that's not a number with an empty string. In other words, we're going to eliminate it from the string. So in this case, we can just say /d, which is a regular expression, special character, meaning not a number, and say plus for more than one. Okay, so I postulate that if we resubmit this form, we should get 4545. Awesome. So that's the gist of overwriting a setter in this case. Any questions about this before we move on? Is this totally trivial to you guys? Okay. All right, sweet. Just wondering. All right, so let's say that for security purposes, we only want to show the last 4 digits of a credit card number. So I've seen a lot of sites do this, like e-commerce sites. You enter your credit card number, it does something with your number, but then shows a bunch of asterisks, characters, placeholder characters, and then the last 4 digits of your card. So something that kind of looks like, oops, this is our template, so like blah, 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 4545 or something. Just to indicate that a valid number exists, but not to tell you exactly what it is. So in this case, we're going to need a means to output that. Let me put in some numbers that are actually long enough to do that. So So what I would expect to see is asterisk, asterisk, and then the numbers. So number isn't really capable of doing that. I'm going to need to write an alternative accessor method that takes the number, transforms it in some way to anonymize it, and then outputs it to the screen. So in my template, I'll just update this method that used to iterate through the credit cards and list them, and I'll call this like last 4 digits or something. Remember that our model in this case is a credit card, so last 4 digits is perhaps arguably a reasonable name. So last 4 digits, we'll take our number, and now we need to figure out how to grab the last 4 digits. So let's say we want to, actually, I think Rails might have it back here.
I think it does.
Last 4 like that? Sweet. All right, no thinking required. It's fortunate.
Yep.
Beautiful. All right, and now we want to pad the rest of the numbers with the number of digits in excess of 4. So, I guess I can think of a dumb way to do that. Let's say number.length. Sorry, -4. Let's take the max of this. 0. This is placeholders. So we can multiply the number of placeholders required times the placeholder character and get the last 4 numbers. Okay, so more or less what we expected. All right, so we've got our credit card class doing some work for number formatting, and this is maybe a reasonable place to stop. First of all, here's but one thing that we find to be kind of valuable at Foraker is something that we call, or something that is called value objects. So we want to create some value that's able to, or some class that's going to wrap the idea of being a credit card number and provide us a nice interface for getting rid of things like hyphens and normalizing the number, and as well for providing formatting, because you can probably conceive of a scenario where you have additional formatting concerns in addition to just the last 4 digits. So I don't really want to fill up our credit card class completely with those sorts of methods. So we can just extract a quick class out here, give it an initializer so it gets a number, which it's going to hold in an instance variable. And so this is going to implement methods like last4, and it's also going to implement a method called normalize. So now we can instantiate one of these things, and in this case, since we're trying to assign it to our column via active record, we can just call normalize on this. So normalize is going to take number, 2s it, g sub it, great. And so we can test out just that portion. So let's try this. Okay. So it seems to have correctly assigned it, and let's verify briefly that our information stripping is working. Cool. So then the last thing to do is when we read a number out of the database, we're going to override the getter just as we overrode the setter function here. So now we're going to, rather than returning just a primitive string value, we're going to return a class. So number.new, and there's our friend super, pulling the raw string value out of the database and allowing us to instantiate a number. So now our view is going to look something like card.number.last4. Okay. Let's move this method as part of our refactor down to last4. And just to make our lives easier, let's throw an adder accessor here. Sorry, adder here. Just so we don't have to talk to our instance variable directly. Okay, so there's our number class. Hopefully we're in business. Okay, so we're getting the same thing back now. So I guess what you might be wondering now is like, why would you do this? Why is this necessary? Why is this helpful? I think it's helpful for a couple of reasons. One of them is an easy win. It's the 2s method. So when you perform operation, the string interpolation operation in Ruby, so that looks like this. So this could be, for example, my name is user.name. So this enables us to interpolate a value into a string. Whatever we return from this method, user.name, Ruby is going to call .2s to attempt to give that object one last option, or one last opportunity to coerce itself into a string before it gets dumped into the real string. So if we want the canonical string representation of our card to be the last 4 digits, then we can return last4, and anytime we interpolate a number into a string, for example, card number is number, we're going to automatically get that last 4 behavior. And in this case, string interpolation is not the only Ruby method. I guess this isn't really a method, but I guess what I'm trying to say is ERB, which is doing all of this Ruby interpolation, is also going to follow the lead of our string interpolation, and it's going to call the 2s method as well. So if I call number.2s right now, I'll get my same behavior from before, because calling 2s on a number is going to anonymize it. But additionally, I can just go ahead and remove this bit, and it will spit out the same value, because templates call 2s on things. So that's one potential advantage. Another potential advantage is that Ruby objects are capable of comparing themselves, and so we can develop a rich semantics for comparing different credit card numbers. So, for example, I might want to compare this credit card number with another credit card number. So actually, let me just pull this up for 1 sec. Place where we can evaluate it easily. Let's look at that hopefully. Get rid of more lines to show you a bit. Okay, so if we instantiate a number right now, number new 1, 2, 3, and number new 1, 2, 3. So these are effectively the same credit card number, and we ask Ruby to print the to evaluate that statement and print the result. We'll see that this number on the left does not indeed equal the number on the right. And as far as our system is concerned, these values, by virtue of having the same string value, are in fact equivalent. So Ruby gives us the ability to accept another object, in this case another credit card number, and we can compare our number to the...
Is it comparing the objects right now?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if you instantiate any Ruby objects, it is born into the world with its own object ID, sort of a globally unique identifier for that object. So we can actually, before we dive into the other thing, we can look at this. So this object ID is pretty long, and I think probably just refers at some point to where this object is allocated in memory.
Right.
So that's not really what we want, though. Our domain demands that a credit card number be considered equal to another credit card number if they have the same string. So Ruby's got our back. We can compare these two things, and I think probably the salient thing to notice here is that equals equals is not in fact an operator in Ruby. It's a method call. So what we're actually doing is we're calling the equals method on this first instance of number and passing in this right-hand instance of number. But we tend to just sugar that syntax up so that it looks like an operator. And indeed, if we evaluate that, we can get true, which is kind of nice. And so lastly, another thing I would mention is that Ruby has strong semantic support for defining your own version of equality, but you can also compare numbers, or you can compare arbitrary objects if they implement this spaceship operator, which means, well, actually, it's probably easier to understand if we just look at the example. So, because strings, the primitive objects that are the kind of identifiers of our number class, because strings implement this spaceship operator, Ruby can leverage this information to compare two numbers. So what that looks like in practice is if I put these two numbers into an array, let's make this 4, 5, 6. They'll start out oh, puts, okay. That's bad. Let me just run for a second. Sorry, so puts, or put s, is another instance where Ruby is implicitly calling the toS method. And I was using last, which we saw here. But that's only supported in Rails, it's not supported in Ruby itself, so it was mad. Anyway, so there are our two numbers, and so spaceship operator gives me the ability to call sort, and any collection of these numbers, or any collection of anything that implements this spaceship operator, can successfully be supported in an intelligent way. Oh yeah, it is sleeping, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, yeah. So just in summation, treat your users well. Do what you think they intended to do, accept liberally their input, and overriding setters and getters in this fashion can be a really nice way to achieve that. Additionally, when formatting concerns start to get out of hand, or you end up with something like a number that feels sort of like a core primitive value in and of itself, or almost a scalar in the system, you can extract those things out of value classes, and that gives you a nice semantics for comparing them and sorting them. So yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking we'd talk about today with Active Record. So yeah, I'd like to just open it up for questions now. If you have any questions about this, if you have any questions about Foraker, if you have any questions about Kyle's personal life, I'm happy to field them.
There's not much there.
When you guys start, did you guys start the company? Like, when was it founded, I guess?
So Foraker's been around for 15 years, and about 10 of those being Boulder. We had our two founders, our two brothers, are here right now, and they, yeah, I don't know. They started in New York, moved here, maybe sometime in Alaska. Anyway, yeah, we've been in Boulder for a while though. Yeah.
What type of clients do you guys typically work with?
We have a really large range of clients actually. These days we really like to work with customers who are in the first phase of product development. So we try to work on MVPs, and I think that's where we feel we can be most effective. But we work with nonprofits, for-profits, small companies, big companies. We've got just sort of a wide range. We don't have one particular type of client, I guess I would say.
And then do you charge by like just like transaction then, or like would there be a charge like later, or is it just like an upfront thing? I guess is my question.
Oh, so like how do we bill our clients?
Yeah.
So we bill hourly per developer hour. I think per developer 15-minute increments. Yeah, so we don't do fixed bid work. In other words, we don't put together an estimate and say it will cost exactly this much. The nature of software is just so unpredictable that would be a disservice to us or our client, kind of depending on how the situation works. So yeah, we just bill as we go. And we are aggressive about creating product milestones, so we can say that the project starts here, ends here, and then we can't tell you exactly how much it's going to cost in between, but we can give you kind of a rough idea. People go for that. Yeah.
Where did you learn how to code?
I learned how to code mostly at Foraker. I was an intern at Foraker a while ago. I studied economics and biochemistry in college, so I did not have a background in CS. And a friend of mine, I was living in Seattle, a friend of mine lived in Boulder and convinced me to move out here and apply for an internship at Foraker. So.
Were you doing the same kind of development internship that you did?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you just learned on the job?
Pretty much, yeah, and extracurricularly as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I was just curious how, like, do you guys usually have classes within models? Is that like fairly common in your code base? Like, what if you needed number in another model?
Oh yeah, then it's right for extraction, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's totally acceptable to have private classes
Yeah.
for a while, especially if they're only referenced internally by that class. So it's definitely not uncommon, but when things begin to grow in complexity, number is probably a reasonable example. I think that deserves its own qualified space in our domain. So it's probably a prime example of when to use a private class.
As an intern, what's a typical day or week like?
So typical week is pretty similar to what a typical developer week would look like. Definitely looking at code most of the time. Yeah, so I guess I'll just harken back to those categories I was talking about before. You've got some real pairing time with actual developers. You've got some time where you're just like looking through the Rails guides, doing some research on your own, and then time where you're at a whiteboard with other interns, breaking up responsibilities and working on the product with your peers.
Actually, another question along that line.
Yeah.
Are you guys looking for people who are mostly jack of all trades, so you can handle front end, back end, and all that, or more of like a front end intern, back end intern, strategy intern, stuff like that?
Definitely the jack of all trades variety. It used to be the case that the front end had its own set of particular idiosyncrasies that it demanded its own role, and so we would have front end developers, back end developers. But that just isn't really the case anymore. The tooling around the front end, especially with CSS, is really, really good these days. And also JavaScript, which used to be sort of a flourish kind of I don't know, afterthought enhancement, is really important. So we ended up several years ago having people who mostly were writing CSS in charge of our JavaScript programming, and that didn't work so well. So we decided that the same talents that make someone good on the back end make someone good on the front end. Like to unify that role.
Do you guys have?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
I was just curious where you asked it. Are people doing that typically, you think?
I was actually curious, I mean, more on your end, are you seeing that companies are hiring, young college kids who can do it all? Or are you having more for kids who are specialized in one area?
Gotcha. Okay.
I mean, I guess again, amongst us, not too many of us are really jack of all trades.
Okay. Yeah. And when we clarify, that's where we'd like our developers to be. Definitely don't expect that of interns. I mean, that's not. It wouldn't be reasonable. Sure.
Okay. Thanks.
I was just curious, do you have separate designers, and then do you have designer interns or no?
We do have separate designers. I don't think that we're doing design interns this year, although I can double check on that. We've just had, like, they're not really feeling it this year, I guess.
Yeah, but I think it's still in flux, but I think we're leaning towards like not having design interns this year. So.
Cool.
And we've got a junior designer, so we don't get spread too thinly.
And I mean, I guess just to follow up on your question, like we don't really expect any sort of particular knowledge of specific technology or anything out of interns. We're mostly just looking for people who are really excited to learn, able to learn quickly. So I mean, you can come in with like, very little Ruby and Rails knowledge. That's fine, as long as like you're smart and you can pick up quickly and you're excited to get involved. But yeah, like you said, developers, we do Ruby, Rails, we do JavaScript, we do CSS, we do HTML. So sort of, I mean, the idea is you sort of get those up as you go, right?
Sweet. Let's
We want to
talk.
learn this. Yeah.
What caused you to switch over from business to Rails?
So in particular, I was doing economic stuff, and my senior thesis was something, it was programming related, I guess, and it just got really frustrated that I couldn't operationalize the things that I was working on, and that got me interested in programming overall. And then I also ran into met a person who's now a good friend at a bar randomly in Seattle, and he was a programmer. I didn't know that was a thing that you could do. I wasn't really thinking about it. He was like, yeah, I do that. You can too. So that it just sounded much more intriguing to me than, I don't know, whatever economics majors do. I'm not really sure. Never figured that out.
Cool. Well, are you cool to stick around a little and have people ask questions?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks.
Thank you.